No spoilers from the books is our promise here. If you're worried about that, I'm worried about that, and I haven't read the books. And it makes it like kind of hard to engage with some stuff on the internet because I'm worried if I'm not familiar with the source that like book spoilers are going to creep in. I want to avoid them.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, we'll put a little bit of music in here as always, and on the other side, we'll be talking about Silo.
Okay, we're here to talk about Silo on Apple TV, Season 3, Episode 4. Whatever you do, don't go home. Written by Jessica Blair and directed by Arik Avellino. In Washington, D.C., Daniel and Helen are trying to track down who stole the information that Stevens showed them about the Iran mission. To stay safe, Helen takes them to an apartment owned by an ex of hers named Palmer so they can sort out their next move. Daniel reaches out to an old military buddy named Sam who works at the Pentagon who's looking for some help, but Sam is reluctant to get involved with them. They are then approached by the mysterious man who's been appearing around them lately, and he promises Daniel and Helen a second chance if they will stop digging around the Iran story, but also seems to threaten to take Charlotte off of her medical care. Daniel and Helen decide to part ways, but later in the week, Daniel gets a call from Sam, who says he has something that they are, quote, not going to believe. Daniel picks up Helen, and they drive off to go meet Sam. In Silo 18, Camille begins making her plans to kill Juliet and tells the guard Emerson and Nurse Amy to make sure that she is unconscious. However, the nurse gives Emerson the shot and helps Juliet escape, sacrificing herself to the raiders so Juliet can get away. Elsewhere in the silo, the outsiders debate with Lucas Kyle about what is actually happening outside the silo, and Lucas tells them what they see in the helmets is a fake and it is uninhabitable outside. Billings also continues to investigate Orla Kent's disappearance and death with a new shadow to the head of supply. At the end of the episode, Juliet reunites with Shirley, and the two go into an old entrance near the Digger Void they thought was closed off by Walker. Juliet makes her way down and discovers down there an injured but very much alive Bernard. That's quite the reveal at the end of this episode. Maybe we should sort of start or build to that. I would say this idea of Bernard being alive was somewhere in the neighborhood of rumored to expected. Was this a surprise to you based on what we knew before? Did you think that this was coming? Sort of, it seems all sort of roads led to this. So how shocked were you by this revelation?
I was relatively shocked, although there was a way in which the episode built to it that made me less shocked than I might have been otherwise, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Um, it is odd that I'm more into the show than I've ever been. I'm writing on it each week. People can read my recaps on tvobsessive.com. And of course, I wrote on season one, and we podcasted together on season two, and you wrote on season two, and now I'm writing on season three. Um, and part of that was, at least from my perspective, after season one, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I like this show all right, but I'm not super into it. And I knew you were in terms of that, decision for you to write on season two, as I recall. Anyhow, now, I mean, I'm totally in. And so I am the kind of person who wants to also go read other stuff and maybe, you
Yeah.
know, uh, listen to other podcasts and YouTubers and stuff like that. But I'm hesitant to go beyond my comfort zone because I'm afraid that they're going to give book spoilers. And it's like
Yeah.
I have a couple of people where I know that they won't, right? Like I think I mentioned Miscellaneous Gab on here last week. I know she hasn't read the books. All right. Pete Peppers, I know has read the books, but I trust him to not tell me. He's made that promise, and I trust him. I've watched his stuff for a while. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, so I don't know. I guess, in a very long-winded way, I'm saying I hadn't really heard the rumors that you were talking about or read them. But I do recall our conversation a few weeks ago, which I think was right
Mhm.
after the premiere, where I think we agreed with a degree of certainty that Bernard was definitely dead. So there's something to re-examine here, and I have a line of interpretation on all of this. I don't know if we want to start there, or I guess we already have to some degree. But what are your thoughts here about Bernard being alive?
Yeah, so it allows for, I guess, a fuller conversation about this whole thing, because at least to a certain point in the books, we learn that Bernard is not dead, and so that sort of we're now I guess back on track, as it were, with keeping with the story. It was interesting to see, and I was with you when we saw his death, quote unquote, back in what looked like the first episode. Ambiguity about it. And so this does come a little bit of a shock that we're going to see this. However, it does track with maybe keeping with the honesty of what we know, at least to this point in the story in the books, not going beyond this. But he is alive, and it just seems like this is going to trigger something pretty massive going forward. I know I've expressed to you in the past couple of episodes about just sort of the circular sort of cat and mouse. We're going to do this all season. Now we can kind of propel some things forward that maybe we wouldn't have been able to if Bernard was not around.
Yeah, and I'm by no means unhappy. I found myself thinking about this quite a bit, and writing about it more maybe in my recap article for this week. If people want to go read it, then we will get into here. That should be out by the time you're listening to this, by the way, go to tvobsessive.com. But like, I feel like the reason why we were relatively certain, or there was like a lack of ambiguity, was because of what we saw on the screen and that basic kind of rule of television that what you see is reality unless it is clearly marked as a dream sequence or hallucination or
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
or it's clearly marked that we're playing with perspective and you're seeing it from someone's perspective. Or like when we talked about disclaimer, it was like, okay, what we're seeing is a portrayal of the events in the book
yeah.
that's within the show or whatever. And that's not quite going on here. Um, and it made me think back to the scene. There's a bit in season one. I, I don't know why the show would want to remind me of this. Maybe they didn't think about it. But do you remember when the power went out and it was like through the cafeteria window, it was showing that it was nice outside?
Oh, yes, yes. The screen glitched. Yeah.
I got so hung up on that it never occurred to me that they were projecting the stuff inside the helmets. Like even after
Yes.
I'd watched the season finale, you can go look at that recap. There's someone yelling at me in the comments. I'm like, oh, it never occurred to me. What about this thing in the previous episode?
Yep.
So anyway, I don't know if this is quite the same because maybe there's a way in which it's not violating the rule as I sit with it, but it would have to be like, okay, what we saw happened, but what
Hmm.
we didn't see was then, Sims pokes a hole in his mouth, because he's like wrapping the guy's face in saran wrap. And
Yeah.
then you can say, okay, well, it's a fake. They burned someone else's body and they were pretending it was Bernard's body. All right, that's fair enough. But it's particularly that scene where it definitely seems like he's suffocating him, you
Yep.
know? So is there a reason why he would have to wrap him in plastic like that? I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see if there are more things along similar lines because it does have me thinking about this question of whether the show is violating that kind of norm I was talking about. I mean, we're already in a series where we can't take anything anyone says as face value, but can we believe our eyes as TV viewers? That's a dangerous game, to do this kind of thing that makes you start thinking you also have to question that. So,
Yeah. And that was, I think, I've talked to you, I think, about the disadvantages of reading some of these things. And this was certainly one of them. The idea that it would be really weird if they stuck with this idea that Bernard is dead based on, again, I've not read the third book yet, but based on just things I know that are to come, it would be odd to do this without Bernard. And so it's always just sort of been in the back of my brain that this could happen. But then what I remain curious about or interested in is, okay, well then who, I guess I have to land right now that this was Sims that
yeah.
saved him or put him there. And so, okay, what's the reason for that? Trying to go against Camille's wishes, trying to, sort of circumvent what's happening with Camille and the legacy. So I am very, very interested now where that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've pieced that together pretty thoroughly, and you almost have to do it in retrospect, but I'll give it to people listening. Again, you can find this in my recap article for sure if you want it like in written form, and it might almost be clearer. But yeah, I think it has to be Sims. And it means that retrospectively, there's a number of things to kind of reinterpret, as it were. So, over the course of this episode, as you mentioned in your summary, Nurse Amy helps Juliet escape, right? And then says, I've been helping you regain your memory, right? And she goes, well, I've been spitting on my pills. She's like, I stopped giving you the real meds even before you did that. Someone asked me to. You're going like,
Yeah.
who? Then, as you said, she creates a diversion for the Raiders, and she tells Juliet to go to this room number 76, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when Juliet gets to that room 76, who's there? Robert Sims.
Yep.
And he says something like, you got to listen to me, but she freaks out. Shirley shows up. They break off the door handle. They trap Sims inside. And then blah, 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 blah. And then we're discovering that Bernard's alive. So it seems pretty clear to me, at least, that Bernard is alive because Sims kept him alive secretly. Um, and why would Sims do that? Well, maybe it's because Bernard told him that Juliet had told Bernard that she knew how to disable the safeguard.
Correct. Yep. Yep. There are people that already are. We've talked about the coalition building underneath Juliet and her support, but there's now this sort of this secret thing of people that know very limited pieces of information, but very helpful pieces of information that could help push back against whatever it is that Camille is doing with the algorithm. Sim shows up, I think, at the very beginning of this episode, and offers whatever assistance, whatever help his wife needs. But now we clearly know that he is secretly, or we can now strongly presume that he is secretly working against her in some way to prevent what she and the algorithm are trying to do.
Well, and this part I think is interesting because I don't know if it's as straightforward as to say that he's working against Camille, um, at least in terms of what he'd be telling himself here, right? Because Camille, of course, is being coerced by the algorithm. I mean, she's presented with things as though she has a choice, but is it really a free
Yeah.
choice? Yeah, it's largely a forced choice. It's kind of like kill Juliet or I'm going to kill
We're gonna
everyone. You know what I mean?
we're
It's
gonna
like
wipe out everything. Yeah,
not
exactly.
quite a free choice. And so I think that Robert would be telling himself that even if he's hiding things from his wife and practicing some deception, he's
Hmm.
really doing it in a way that is in line with her interests, but they can't even talk about it safely.
Right.
She can't know. And so he is in line. That's a running theme throughout this whole series in a certain way. And it's
Yeah.
always something to question. One of the things I always like to play with my own mind is, well, like to what extent stuff like this is justifiable.
Yeah.
And where I'm at, it's like I don't think that Sims is suddenly a good guy, but
No.
it does make some sense to me as I'm piecing it together along these lines. And if people don't remember, I mentioned this a minute ago, but just make clear, you could revisit the end of season two in that scene between Juliet and Bernard, that dialogue I'm pulling on here, right? Because Juliet says she doesn't know who's behind it. Bernard says he knows who, but he doesn't know why, and he doesn't care anymore.
Hmm.
But also in that dialogue, Juliet does say something to him about how she knows how to disable the safeguard. I forget exactly how she puts it. You have to double check the dialogue, but that's the point of it.
That's right.
Um, so if Bernard was able to convey that to Sims,
That's what I'm gonna say. Yep. Yep.
yeah, then of course Sims also feels spurred. I mean, by Bernard before, right? He's like supposed to be Bernard's
Yeah.
shadow. But then the algorithm rejects him and is like, no, I'm only going to talk to Camille and get out of here, Robert.
Yeah.
Um,
To what
and
to what extent do you think the algorithm hears all, knows all, sees all? I mean, it can't hear every conversation, but it seems like it knows most things.
good, good, good. It's really interesting to me the extent that it doesn't.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know that we have all the details. We know from previous seasons they have or at least had cameras all over the place.
Yes.
There were some indications in the beginning of season three that maybe they got rid of some of the cameras. Did they? Didn't they? I don't know how much surveillance is there, but like I would guess that whatever is being surveilled in that way would be fed into the algorithm.
Part of the reason why
Um,
Walker and her team came up with their own sign language, basically.
yeah, but if you the fact that this season has given us those scenes where Camille's talking to the algorithm,
Hmm.
like I don't love those scenes, but they do provide food for thought, for a lot of questions, including this one, because it
Yeah.
definitely seems like the algorithm needs Camille to provide it with information during those
Yes, I
scenes.
think so.
So it's definitely not, it doesn't have some kind of God's eye perspective on everything in the
Right.
silo.
Yeah. That's where I've landed as well. It's certainly not omnipresent. It needs its protege. It's eyes in the on the ground, boots on the ground there to inform it of certain things that it just can't know.
Yeah. But then this is one of those things that makes me start wondering, like, well, why not? When you're setting up the silo, why not make it more omniscient, And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that keeps feeding into the theory in the back of my mind, like maybe this is some complicated social experiment kind of thing, because some of these little details, you're like, I'm not sure if it even fully makes sense
Yeah.
why they're doing this. So I'm searching for an explanation. Anyway, dialing back to what we do know. Bernard's alive. I think it has to
Yep.
be Sims. I don't think there can be any other
Yep.
explanation. You have to imagine that he did something like poke a hole in the saran wrap so that Bernard could breathe after what we saw before.
Yeah.
Um, or the show was just lying to us visually.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and Martha's involved? What do you think there?
Mhm.
Because
In what
she
way?
was, well, look, the official story is that she sealed access to the digger point where they find Bernard.
Yes. Yes.
But it's not like completely sealed up. There's a
Right.
sign that says, no access or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's actually a door. And
Hmm.
behind that door is Bernard. So this is what's leading me to think that Martha's involved.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder to what degree we've talked about the different groups that are forming, right? To what degree there is a um, not Shirley group that's sort of kept in mind this idea of rebellion and wanting to know the truth. There are the outsiders, which we clearly know their perspective and what they're trying to uncover. And maybe Martha is kind of splitting between the Knox Shirley group, and now there is a sort of Sims secret group with Martha, Sims, Bernard. Now Juliet's going to be a part of this. I don't see how it could be much bigger than that. It doesn't seem that Knox and Shirley in that group are aware of any of this.
No, I don't think they are. And I don't think Kennedy and the outsiders are either, although there are indications that they're on their way, right? Because
Yeah.
Lucas ultimately convinces them to like, hey, let's go find Juliet and ask her. So I think these various groups are going to come together and share information. At least that's my hope.
Yes. Yes.
And then there's one other thread, and I found myself wondering even more after this episode than previous ones, where's Carla McClain? Right? Like,
Mm.
do people even recall that she's been a character in this show? Like, they keep talking about her in the season, but we haven't seen her, right? She's like Martha's
La-
ex-wife, right?
Last
Um,
we saw her, she was imprisoned, and Martha agreed to help Bernard to get her out, right?
right, back in season two, you
Yeah.
know? So I have no idea. I haven't really tried to score casting information or whatever. They could always hide things anyway. Like I literally don't know if the actress is in the season.
Yeah.
Um, but she should be. Yeah, they keep talking about her, right? So where's she, right? And that's what's led me to kind of think, okay, well, if that was supposed to be sealed and it's not, that makes me think Martha's involved. And then now I'm jumping to think, okay, Carla's also involved to maybe even greater degree. Like the reason we haven't been seeing Carla is because she's been tending to Bernard and the secret.
Yeah, that's true.
And then unfortunately, I do start wondering if they're the ones who are stealing stuff from Supply for the sake of
Hmm.
Bernard, because we've got this other question of who killed Orla Kent. And it's like I sort of refuse to believe that it could have been Martha or Carla, but I guess I could believe it if it was Robert Sims.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're onto something here. It. Hmm. I'm trying to think if there are others that could be involved in this. I think the Orla Kent thing is it does remain a mystery, but it remains the biggest mystery to me is like how these groups could intersect. Because clearly that's something Billings is still doing, trying to figure this out. If it's important enough of a mystery that we're spending every episode looking into this. And so are these two things overlapping in some way? But I hadn't even thought about the idea that, oh, yeah, maybe there are things being used out of supply to keep, we didn't know Bernard was alive, but there now we know that supply may have been a supplier of things to keep, Bernard alive in some way, and that there was this consciously or unconsciously, the people there were helping. That has to be, or I would say there's a strong indication now that this is these are going to be tied together in some way.
Yeah, that's kind of my prediction about how these threads come together. And then, so sort of through the Orla Kent investigation, that ends up bringing in Billings and what's the other guy's name? He hasn't been in the season much. Murphy, I think is his name.
Oh
The
yeah,
other
yeah,
cop
you're right, Murphy. Yeah.
he hasn't been in this all that much, but I don't know. That's my prediction at least. I hope this doesn't take six more episodes, but
Yeah.
it probably will. Probably will. I'm keeping my expectations along the lines of this show has historically had a really slow pace, and I'm not expecting everything to come together until the end of the season. But
Hmm.
so far, I don't know if you agree, but so far I feel like this season hasn't felt slow. It's felt like we're moving right along, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, I would certainly say it's a faster pace. As a matter of fact, I think the last two episodes of the Silo stuff started moving faster than the Washington D.C. stuff, and so this,
Yeah,
yeah, the pace of what's happening in the Silo has certainly picked up. And as we sort of unravel these mysteries and peel back the layers of what's happening here, I think that it has gotten much more propulsive. And I predict, and this could kind of leads into the comment I wanted to make about Juliet and what she has done so far this season. I kind of predict that that pace is going to keep up not only the rest of the season, but I think the rest of the series.
yeah.
The thing I wanted to comment on is before we move away from the silo is, and I've looked at this. Rebecca Ferguson has addressed this. Their comments have been made publicly about this. The Juliet amnesia storyline was fabricated, right? Was made up to it just seems like to get us to episode 5, basically, right? They just needed to put her in place where they could stall her so that they could get to the point where we meet Bernard and then we go and actually continue what happens to the rest of the story to the end of the series. I've talked before about how the book 2 does not include or barely includes Juliet and what's happening in Silo 18. And so, as you have pointed out, they're not going to sideline Rebecca Ferguson for a season to focus on other things. And so they kind of put her in this state where she could be pressed pause until we get to Bernard. And now that we have Bernard, we can move forward pretty fast. And I think
Yeah.
that we'll see both timelines start to really pick up as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hope so. You put something in our notes along these lines with the word controversy in quotes. Did you want to talk more about the, I mean, like,
Just the idea
a
of,
lot of negative sentiments out there around this, or
yeah, negative sentiments from those that have consumed the books that like, this has never happened to Juliet. Why would you sort of neuter her in a certain way? Why would you put her in this position where she's got to remember all these things that have happened in the past 2 years? But basically, it was, I think they just couldn't align the two timelines of these things that are happening to make one sort of coherent movement towards them
yeah.
meeting at the end or meeting next season at some point. And so now that that's over, I predict that now that we have Bernard and we have her off the meds, that her memory will start coming back a lot faster than it has before.
I presume so. Hmm, as far as this whole amnesia storyline with Juliet, I'm not the biggest fan of the kind of amnesia trope in general.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily that aspect, but um, I mean, I did accept it here ultimately. I decided to. By and large, I would say I understand if you're talking about diverging from the book and maybe negative comments are coming from book readers. Um, you might be hard pressed to find someone who will defend this more stridently than I will.
Hmm. Hmm.
One, the TV show is not the book. Forget about it.
That's right. That's right.
Two, I actually put something to me. It's like the third or fourth time. Go read my recap on but I said something about this in the article I wrote on this one. I am of the mind that even if the reason is hey, we can't sideline Rebecca Ferguson. We have to keep Rebecca Ferguson on our screens. We need to figure out a way to do that. And we can't straightforwardly adapt the books, because
Yeah, yeah,
that this decision has made this series soar as a great television show
hmm
in a way that maybe seasons one and two weren't.
yep,
So
yep,
I think that this has actually been better television than the first two seasons of the show. And related to that, I was thinking about how, and we'll segue to the before time storyline here in a moment, but they've also, through these four episodes at least, managed a really um, good kind of parallelism
yep,
between those stories, thematically, at least, if nothing else. I mean, you can think about the episode titles and the way in which it's like they managed so far to make the episode titles play in both
yeah,
storylines. Like even in this episode, where the title of the episode is literally something Helen says to Daniel,
yeah,
it also fits with the Juliet storyline.
yeah.
What,
That's exactly right.
hey
Yeah,
Juliet, whatever you do, don't go home. You
yeah.
know,
I
um,
I am with you on this. I think that third season has really accelerated to a point that as much as there was so much good in season one and in some in season two as well, it's accelerated to the point where it is able to tell a very interesting story, not combining the timelines, but putting the two timelines in parallel of one another and resonating with these themes. And I think I remember telling you even before we started podcasting about the season is that, how much I thought that the second book was interesting, and the second book largely about this before time storyline, being able to say, okay, well, if this stuff is so good, let's draw from some of that and make it work sort of in tandem with what's happening in these two timelines. I think that has worked well. So you're not going to hear any complaints from me. It's just interesting that, this is far from the first show to be adapted from books where they've had to make wild changes. But yeah, it unlike maybe a Game of Thrones book or another one, you may not find many adaptations where it just completely removes the main character from a book for 600 pages of text. You're going to figure out what to do about that.
well, it would be a big risk to take on a TV series as opposed to a book
Yes,
for sure. But that's
correct.
okay. But yeah, what I'm suggesting is for those reasons, whatever, you know, I think it's making it better television. I hope they
Yep,
keep it up, as you say. Like I hope that you're right in what you were saying before with regard to the pacing and everything else. Because look, if I've had one criticism of this show through the first two seasons, it did
yep,
relate to the pacing and so on. But like,
yep,
how do you make sense of that? Well, one way to make sense of it is actually to think about it as an adaptation of the source material, where you say, okay, well, this is the bit of it that we're going to do in season one. This is the beginning, this is the end, and
yes,
then we need to fill out the middle, and it's got to be 10 episodes. You know what I mean?
yes,
So,
yes,
if they're in sort of taking some liberties or moving away from the source material a bit, I don't know. I think that makes it um, maybe it makes it more open for them to think about just crafting a good TV show. And of course, you got Graham Yost behind the scenes here, who is a name, I've been familiar with for a while. I definitely hold him in some esteem as a showrunner and all of that. So,
definitely, definitely.
um, yeah, well, we need to talk about Daniel. We need to talk about Helen. We need to talk
hmm
about all this stuff. Maybe this is quicker. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So I actually didn't think that much happened with them this
Okay.
episode. We have a conversation with the mystery man. We get I'm going to give you some big news. Come find it. But there's not too much else that a lot of just like, what's our next move conversations.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I guess that's right. But there are some questions here. I'll go ahead and point out, I mean, so they don't know what to do exactly when they find that Steve
Mm.
is gone, right? And I
Yep.
guess his name really is Steve. Helen says, so
Yeah.
whatever. Um, and like Daniel wants to call someone, she smashed his phone, whatever. And anyway, so she says, she gives them the address and says, don't show up until 10 p.m. And when he gets there, it's a place that she says belongs to her ex named Palmer. We haven't seen. I don't know if we'll ever meet him. Well, like he's deployed in Sudan or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like should I be suspicious of Helen here? Or were you suspicious of Helen here at all? Is it just the show, um, like making me suspicious of everyone?
Yeah, I think it is trying to make us suspicious of everyone, particularly as we have, this dark web conversation and all that's going on. I have to say silent on some of this stuff, but I will say that anytime you get taken to a mysterious, very expensive looking apartment to some unnamed man who's off out on assignment, I do get sort of my ears perk up as to, what's actually going on here, that you just have access to this place whenever you want it.
Well, and those were sort of my questions. And why did Daniel have to wait? Why did she need Daniel to wait before he could show up? Was it in order to get Palmer's permission? Is she able to do that when he's on Sudan?
Yeah.
So did she not do that? Do they actually have this guy's permission to be in his apartment? Does she still have a key? Are they really broken up? He's got a huge picture of her on the wall.
Yeah. Does she need to
And
go scrub it of things he doesn't want Daniel to see before he gets there?
does she need to make sure she cleaned up adequately over his corpse that she after she murdered him last week? I don't know. It's just like I have
Yeah.
I really like Helen, by the way. I really like her character. So I hope she's not secretly a evil murderer or whatever. But um, yeah, I don't know. Just there was just enough there that I kind of wondered about, and that I'm not sure if it's going to be
Yeah.
important or not, or even if am supposed to be worried about it narratively. Um, but even further, like, okay, well, if this is supposed to be we're hiding out in a safe house kind of thing, and if this is going to your ex-boyfriend's apartment,
Yeah.
don't you think that the NSA knows where your ex-boyfriend lives?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I I got the impression that she's trying to reference that Palmer is on assignment, like maybe he's another journalist and he's out in Sudan. I don't know what international correspondent has got an apartment like that in Washington, D.C. So, I think there's something going on behind the scenes here, whether it's some shady things going on or this is not what she says it is. I think there's a lot more to be uncovered if they spend more time with that. I have no idea if they spend more time with this story of who this guy is and what this place is.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten a ton either about whatever she got in trouble about before in terms
Mhm.
of making up a false story or something like that.
Yeah, I think Daniel sees a webpage where she, yeah, made up a false source of some kind, but that's about all we know.
Right. But then, part of me wonders, did she, was that really false or what is the story there? Again, is that gonna matter? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, they kind of piece together this idea that Steve was actually using his chess game to communicate with someone. I didn't go back and look at the chess game, by the way. I'm past it.
All right.
TV shows and movies just almost always get chess wrong, and it bothers me because I don't understand why. Like, it's not that complicated of a game. Do you play chess? Do you
Yes,
play
I play
chess?
chess.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
this is like so. Like maybe you're with me on this, or maybe there are some exceptions, but it's just like there's so many instances where they'll use chess in the TV show, and it's like that's not how chess works. And I don't. It's like I don't understand why you can't get it better than that. Anyhow, Daniel says he saw that the move that Steve made didn't make sense.
Yeah.
He was exposing his king or whatever. So they're looking for whoever he was playing against, thinking he was trying to communicate with that person. That's why they contact Sam.
Hmm.
And Sam originally says, "Hey, like I enjoyed being in a band with you or whatever back in the day, but no, I'm not going to give you military secrets." Fair
Right,
enough.
right.
But then, yeah, calls later and says, "Okay, well, you created an itch. I decided to scratch, and I went down a rabbit hole, and then you're not going to believe this, and we don't find out what." So, in one sense, you're right.
Yeah,
There's not a ton here, although there's the stuff in the middle we should
yeah.
circle back to about the
Although
mystery man.
Sam has set himself up for a problem if he is right in that every 6 months he has to take a lie detector test. So now he's put himself on the chopping block to help this. So I don't know if that'll ever circle back, but that was an interesting piece
Yeah,
of knowledge to have to try to deal with.
it's another talking about a pet peeve, man. Lie detector tests in TV and film. It's like those things aren't admissible in court. You know why they aren't
Yeah,
admissible
exactly.
in court? Because they
Exactly.
don't work. Um, and I mean, it is true though. It's actually a real world thing as well because they do give people polygraphs all the time, even
Mhm.
though they don't really work. And what they test is they don't test whether you're lying. They test physiological responses that you might associate with lying, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, they
So all you got to do is
definitely,
create a baseline of that response all the time, and you're good to go. At least
yeah.
that's what television is taught me.
So my understanding is that what you should do is when they're asking you the baseline questions, clench your rectum. That's what that's what I've read. I've never tried it. I've never been given a polygraph, whatever.
Exactly.
Um,
That's exactly what I've read too.
but anyway, yeah, I mean, whether it's that or something else, like certainly he could get in trouble if he's giving away confidential information
Yeah.
or whatever. We'll find out what that is. But what do you make of this guy? I think I'm going to go ahead and say his name. His name is on IMDb. Um,
Okay.
Reed Birney's character is on the page as Henry. I don't know if that feels like a spoiler to anyone. If it did for anyone, I guess it would be book readers who probably put it together already. That's what I'm guessing. I haven't read the book, so I don't know who Henry is, but yeah, he does have a name, and it's probably helpful to be able to refer to him as such. But it hasn't been said in the
Okay.
show. You're absolutely right. It has not been said in the show.
Henry could mean something in terms of what we see in the books. Also, could be a combination of several different characters who could be responsible for a lot of different things. So I don't know that we necessarily can read too much into it at this point about what this character is and what he does and what his role is, other than just he is the force fighting against what Daniel and Helen are trying to accomplish. I imagine as we move forward, we'll hear and see more about whatever his network is or who he is quote unquote working for as we move along. But nothing, I think, big reveal in terms of what this name is.
Yeah, it's just kind of odd that they're hiding it from us. Maybe it has
Yeah.
some effect, to not give it to us in the show. I think it was last week when I compared him to the cigarette smoking man from the X-Files.
Yeah.
I continue to think that's apt. Like his role in things is clear enough. You know what I mean? He is the
Yeah.
um, whatever Wizard of Oz kind of, behind the scenes puppeteer. I mean, like that's the kind of character he's playing. I am curious about a number of things here, of course, the biggest one being directly related, I think, to the silos, although we haven't quite gotten there. If we take that leap, whatever it is, he says that Daniel and Helen are threatening something really important. I presume there's a connection there. Um, he says though that they like gave Steve some cush appointment, a new job, and they also gave money to Mr. Alameda and the pilot's father or whatever. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. Helen says she can't get a hold of either of these people. She has their phone numbers, but it just goes straight to voicemail or says the numbers disconnected or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. And then he's
Yeah.
offering,
I do wonder how much of that is just a smoke screen for, we'll give you a quote unquote second chance, especially as second chance for Helen, the job at New York Times, I presume, and what he's offering to her. Daniel doesn't exactly seem to get a second chance offer. He gets well, we will take your sister off of the support that she needs if you don't do what we want. But I imagine certainly, especially when you're dealing with dark web guys like Steven, this all could be a smoke screen for what he's trying to offer.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it definitely seems like it'd be a mistake to trust him, as it were,
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe he could get Helen a job at the Times, and I don't know, but I am curious, it's just like this guy won't even tell me his name, and I'm going to believe that those people he disappeared are actually like were given presents. I don't know, man. Um, regardless, it seems like by the end of the episode, they have come around to deciding no, they're not going to drop it
Yeah.
um, to take the carrot or avoid the stick. But whatever Sam has uncovered is how this is going to move forward. I guess I thought that he told Daniel on the phone, but maybe I'm wrong about that. How did you read this? You think Daniel already knows what Sam learned, or they're on their way to find out together?
I read it as that Daniel knows,
Okay, me
and
too.
that because of what he heard, he has made a decision to go grab Helen and say, "We need to get back into this, and I can't do it by myself." I think he is going to inform Helen, and they're probably going to go maybe go meet up and learn more about it. But I think Daniel has learned something that has motivated him to get back involved.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it never seemed like he entirely wanted to drop it either. Um, and Helen was more tempted by the Times job. And you're right. I mean, I presume they're referring to the New York Times. They don't say the New York Times, but like, if this is supposed to be your dream job as a journalist who was previously fired from the Washington Post, I don't think it's the Washington Times.
No, I don't think
Um,
so.
this is the Washington Times. I think that is a paper, but it's like down the rugs of, in terms of reputation. Um, good. Yeah. So really, it's left more open in the Before Times timeline here. I did kind of enjoy how the episode played out and that they gave us a bit more of a reveal in the Silo 18 timeline, showing us that Bernard's alive. I mean, there's still tons of questions there, of course, but that was a nice moment to kind of end it on. A little bit frustrated that we didn't actually, learn what Sam has learned, but yeah, next week probably it works well enough.
Yeah, I think we're at a good moment now. We'll be halfway through the season. Again, I think there were some let's balance the plates a bit until we could get to this point. And now we're, for as much as we may have appreciated the pace of the season, I think we may get from what I know, we may get a lot more. I actually think we're going to get a lot more in the Before Times timeline, knowing or expecting what they have to cover over the balance of this season. And frankly, I think the Silo 18 story will be completely new to me because it seems like this is going to take a lot from the third book, which I have not yet read.
Yeah, or it will just be made up for television. Who knows? I don't
Yeah.
know. Again, I haven't read the books at all. So, but man, yeah, I'm in. I'm excited. I hope that they don't, after this episode, proceed to spin their wheels for 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's like 5 episodes of them sitting talking to Bernard in that room while other people come and they hide from Camille. Like, I hope it's not like that. It could be. It definitely could be. We'll see. Oh, I mean, another question I do have, just to mention it as we wrap up here, is about Lucas. And Lucas was hiding in the mines. And of course, it makes some sense that Lucas was hiding in the mines because he'd previously been in the mines. Of course, he hated being in the mines. Did he make friends in the mines? I'm not entirely sure about that, but okay, maybe. But there was another aspect where Camille got worried that he was trying to, through the mines, connect up with tunnels from another silo. And I'm wondering if he really was working on that. And if so, is there any chance that he succeeded? It's a question I
Oh
have.
yeah, that's ooh. It's hard to imagine how you could, you know, dig a hole to another silo, but whether you're trying to correspond with, communicate with, somehow reach another silo, I can see that happening certainly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because it's been there in the season at least, right? That there are rules that they can't go out so far, and
Yeah.
we can put together that the reason there's that rule is because hey, there's actually another silo right over there, and they're also mining down there, right? So your tunnel could run into their tunnels. So there's at least the thought that that's what Lucas was trying to do, and that hasn't come up again. But I wonder a bit about that. Um, of course, down in that digger void area, all the way at the bottom, is where Lucas went, and there was a door, right, where a computer, I don't know if it's the same computer, or is it the same algorithm
Yeah,
computer? Um, but if you remember that from last season, it told him the terrible truth down there, right?
that's right.
So probably worth
That's
reminding people of that as well.
that is something to be interesting to explore going forward. Is the algorithm Luke is talking to the same one Camille is talking to, which is it the same one at the other silos? Are they all connected? Like how does this all integrate? These will be interesting things to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. We hit on how in season two in the other silo it didn't seem to be really active. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, lots of questions. Looking forward to see where we go from here. Anything else you want to say about this episode before we wrap up, Ryan?
I think that's it.
All right, sounds good. So Thanks always for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast. If so, please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and greatly appreciate it. Hit a thumbs up on the video. Be sure to check out tvobsessive.com. You can find written work there on all sorts of TV shows. I'm writing on this season of Silo if you want to read articles. Ryan's currently writing on House of the Dragon, and we've got some other stuff going on too. We're actually there's a lot of TV this summer. We've got articles on Cape
Yeah.
Fear, on Lucky, on Rick and Morty, and I don't think I'm even mentioning everything. So do check
Yeah.
out the site. And if you want to follow us on social media, if you search for TV Obsessive, you should find us. And as for the podcast, we'll be back next week.
Yes, sir. We're looking forward to that. We'll see you then.